Hey guys, Opus 5 is finally here. That means it's time for some rulings. Now, first I want to talk about these kind of select 2 of 4 effects, or 2 of 5 even. These kind of effects, you're sort of building an effect with them. So, it takes up one item on the stack, and like basically the card's entire effect becomes the combined effect of what you chose. So, the entire set of targets is the total combined targets of the effects. So for something like Glacier, for example, you still have to choose legal targets at the time of activation. So you can't choose an active forward for the last ability, which is choose one dull forward, which means you can't actually choose an active forward and say dull it, then deal it 7,000 damage, because you can't actually choose it for that last effect in the first place. It's not a legal target. Secondly, if you say you choose one forward, dull it, and choose a different forward, freeze it, one of those forwards gets removed from the field, so that's no longer a legal target. The other target is still legal, so that effect will still resolve. However, if you say choose one forward, dull it, and your opponent discards a card, and then the forward you're dulling gets removed, so that's no longer a legal target, then they won't have to discard, because the entire set of targets is now illegal. I think that's the main thing to learn about these cards. One interesting thing though about Glacier, for example, again, this is the most interesting one because it's got the kind of most different effects on it. You could actually choose a dull forward with the choose a forward, dull it, and the choose a dull forward, deal 7,000 damage effect. You might ask, why would I do that? Why would I choose the already dull forward to dull it? If they responded with some kind of activation on that forward, then even though it's an illegal target for the dull forward, deal 7,000 damage, it's still a legal target for the dull it, and that one happens first, because the effects will happen in the order that they appear on the card. So Glacier will actually re-dull it, and then still deal 7,000 damage, so it'll be dull again, thanks to Glacier. So that's kind of a cute little play around that you could do with that card. One more thing with these kind of effects, if you choose the same forward with 2 different effects, it still only counts as choosing that forward once. So if you were to choose a Capricious Reaper with both dull it and freeze it on Glacier, you would still only have to discard 1 card. Now on to individual cards. This Red Mage, discarding a Red Mage is part of the cost, that happens at activation. This Ifrit, that discarding is not part of the cost, so this happens at resolution if you choose to do so. This is a friendly reminder that costs that involve your characters, you have to be your own characters. So Carla and Palom, you cannot dull an opponent's active forward for that cost, and Saytuna, you cannot put opponent's backups into the break zone for that cost. They have to be your own characters. Grenade. When a forward enters, and if its printed power is 8,000 or less, but there are field abilities that increase its power above 8,000, then Grenade actually won't trigger. It enters play with those buffs already applied. So if they play an 8,000 power Ice Forward, for example, but they have Jugalarg active, then that forward will enter as a 9,000, Grenade won't trigger. The other thing is forwards enter abilities. Grenade stacks to the enter ability, assuming that forward entered play during its owner's turn. So if a player plays Sabin, for example, and he targets himself with his enter ability, Grenade stacks to that, and then it will kill him because his effect won't have resolved yet. Parabear and Black Mage, because that says this turn, not until end of turn, that means it's changes the rules for the turn. It doesn't actually affect those characters, so the characters that enter after it resolves will still be affected by it. So if you play Parabear and then you play a forward after that, that forward also can't be broken this turn, even though it wasn't in play when you originally played Parabear. Let's see Zuyu. His auto ability, when the forward damage is put the field to the break zone, he can attack once more. That can trigger more than once. So you can essentially keep attacking with him as long as he keeps breaking forwards. Teller, Recall. I've talked about this before, but effects that kind of do an amount times an amount, so like 4,000 for each CPU required, that does the entire damage packet as 1 packet. So if you exile a card off the top that costs 2, then that deals 8,000. So if they have Minwu, that'll still hit a 7,000 power forward, for example. It doesn't do 2 separate packets of 4,000. Fighter and Dark Knight, just because they only do damage to themselves when they resolve, you can actually stack this above the level where they would kill themselves. So Fighter, for example, if you had the fire CP, you could stack that 10 times. Even though he's going to kill himself after the 4th one, you'll still be able to do the rest of that damage and do like 10,000 damage split among their forwards. And same thing with Dark Knight, as long as you stack it. Palom's, when it enters the field, if you control Porom, draw a card. Porom has to be in play at activation and resolution. That works just like Pain's Una effect. Not the Riku effect though. That's a recent change though. Yeah, this one has to be activation and resolution. Volcrum Manius, a blocking forward. So a forward is only blocking if the attacker is still in play. So with Manius, for example, if you were to attack, activate, your opponent blocks, you activate Manius. If they then remove your attacker in response to Manius, their forward actually won't be treated as blocking therefore it won't actually be treated as blocking anymore, so it will become an illegal target and it won't break from Manius. However, obviously the attack still doesn't go through to player damage though. As soon as a forward has declared a block at the start of block step, then there will not be player damage dealt. But it is possible for the forward to no longer be treated as blocking, even though it's still the block step. The Warriors of Light. Again, with the second abilities, it has to be your own characters. The costs that involve characters have to be your own characters. But for the first effect, a forward can only gain that buff once. Once per Warrior of Light. So if you have a Luneth out, and you have a Fire Warrior of Light, other than Luneth, it still only gets 1000 power. It doesn't get the buff twice. And same for all the others. Although, of course, if you have Luneth and Arc out, then your Warrior of Light, other than those two, will actually get 2k, because it's two separate abilities that it's getting the 1000 from. The Emperor. His second auto ability, when your opponent draws a card, dull and free something, that triggers once for each card drawn, even if it's the same effect. So if your opponent uses Moogle, for example, draws 2, then you can dull and freeze 2 things. Trickster vs. LSA. LSA does actually grant all of the Scions in its owner's control haste, so Trickster will take no damage from any of those Scions if they have LSA behind them. Mystic Knight. Its cost reduction does stack with other cost reduction. So if you have a Una, for example, and you attack with Mystic Knight and cast a Leviathan, it'll only cost you 1, because it'll cost 1 less from Una and 1 less from Mystic Knight. However, if you party attack with Mystic Knights, their abilities will trigger separately. So you won't be able to, say, cast 1 summon for 2 less, because you're attacking with 2. Instead, you'll just be able to cast 2 separate summons for 1 less each. Asura, very misleading wording. Negate all damage dealt to it is new wording, we haven't seen this effect before, but that literally translates to remove all damage currently on it, or fully heal it, if you prefer to think of it that way. So it doesn't prevent any future damage, it just removes all the damage currently on it. Although you don't have to use this on a damaged forward, you can just use it on a forward for the activation and draw a card, but yeah. Other than that, it will remove all the damage on it, it will no longer be damaged, but it doesn't prevent any future damage. I should also mention that you can't remove lethal damage with Asura, because the forward will already be broken. So what I mean is, if you have an 8000 power forward and it takes 8000 damage, for example, you won't be able to be like, oh, I'll Asura it to remove the damage before it breaks, because the rules process will have already broken it by the time you get a chance to activate your Asura. Thief, I just want to point out that this can only discard a character card, which is a forward, monster, or backup. You won't be able to discard a summon with Thief. That's a little bit different to Zidane, who can discard any card. Chocobo, just pointing out that that's a field ability. That's why it doesn't say to end of turn or anything like that. It's just while it's in a party, it doesn't take damage. Chocobo Knight. For both the search and the action ability, the card has to exactly match that job or that card name. So its job or card name has to exactly be Chocobo. So you can't search or pull out a Chocobo Knight with its own effect. You can't get a Mecha Chocobo. It has to either be exactly the name Chocobo or exactly the job Chocobo. Death Gaze, very funny misprint. A named action ability with the dull symbol in the wrong place. So that is a misprint. That dull symbol is meant to be an S. So this is ruled and works as if that is an S, not a dull symbol. So you don't have to dull Death Gaze to use the special, and you do have to discard an additional copy of Death Gaze to use that special. A Botanist and Magic Pot have received errata. They can only be used on characters that are unique. That means characters that don't have the 3-card icon in the top right-hand corner. That is an errata. These cards have been changed to do that now. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Carbuncle. If the forward dies before Carbuncle resolves, then of course it's no longer a legal target, and so Carbuncle will actually fizzle and not return to your hand. Gabrant's second ability, during this turn, the next damage dealt to you becomes 0 instead. If you take more than 1 damage at once, which is currently only possible from Zodiac, but if you were about to receive more than 1 damage at once, he prevents all of it. So if you sacrifice Gabrant and then use Zodiac, you will take no damage, regardless how many forwards you break with it. Calbrainer, when it comes back to the field, it comes back as only a monster. It doesn't come back as still a forward, because it's a new instance of the card in play and it is just a monster. Graviton, that's an auto ability, which stacks to the Earth Summon that you cast. So it doesn't work the way you would want it to with something like Carbuncle, for example. If you cast Carbuncle, Graviton will stack to Carbuncle and resolve first, and so then if Carbuncle pushes it over the 9,000 mark, then it won't return to your hand. Cockatrice, if you use it on a forward that is already attacking or blocking, it won't prevent that attack or block, although of course it will still prevent damage dealt to it if it's going to be in combat with something. Cyclone Warden, his second field ability, he gets the buff for himself as well. So most of the time, if one of these is by itself, it'll be actually 5,000, not 3,000, because it'll be gaining its own buff. Doga, this is another misprint. This card is meant to say until end of turn. So your forward does not get permanent protection from all those kind of abilities. This, yeah, just pretend it says until end of turn at the end of that text, just like Cagnazo. Ilua. That protection effect is an auto ability. It triggers in response to the targeting effect and stacks to it. So when her ability resolves, it cancels that effect. But this means if she's targeted by an EX, her ability will trigger, consuming the once per turn trigger. However, the EX will have already resolved, so when her ability resolves, there's nothing left to cancel. So as you can see, EXs are very threatening to this card, because they hit her normally, without her protecting herself from them, but they also remove her protection for the rest of the turn. So yeah, just keep that in mind when using this card. Quan and Black Knight, this is another friendly reminder that when card text references a card's cost, it means printed cost only. So you can't cast a Leviathan with Quan even if you have Yuna up. 3 cost Leviathan, that is. Obviously you could cast the 1 cost Leviathan. Rumza. His last field ability there, when he has 10,000 power or more, gains haste than that ability. That doesn't have to be from his own ability, so if you buff him through other means, for example you have like a Lulu and a Maria, then you would only need 2 extra forwards, he'd gain 2k from his own buff, 2k from those would be 10k, and he would get that haste and that ability, so it doesn't have to be only from his ability. Schrodinger. The card you reveal stays on top. There's nothing special about it. It doesn't go to damage. You don't like mill it or remove from the game or anything. It just stays on top, and then you do whichever effect corresponds to the card type. So if it is forward, then you will draw the card that you saw. You will draw that forward, and so on. Bismarck. That last ability. Halve its power, round down to the nearest 1,000. Now this is the first time we've seen a effect that halves power. As we know, double its power is treated as gain its current power. So halve its power works similarly. It's treated as lose power equal to half of its power. Now, that's why it says round down to the nearest 1,000, because you're losing half, but that half is rounded up. So 9,000 power forward gets its power halved. It's going to lose 5,000 power, which then leaves it on 4,000, and that's why it says round down to the nearest 1,000. You've got 9,000, it's gone down to 4,000. But that's because it's lost 5,000. So then if it gains a buff after that, say it gains 4,000 power, then it will now be on 8,000 power. It'll just be a 9,000 power forward that's lost 5,000 and gained 4,000. Interestingly, if you resolve Bismarck on something to halve its power, and then it doubles its power, if it was an odd power forward in the first place, it would get halved, say 9,000 down to 4,000, and then its double power would put it to 8,000. So it actually wouldn't end up on the same power, even though you just halved it, then doubled it. LLL Knock. Very interesting, funny effect. His first effect, I'll just point out, that say they have something like Yuna, which is, and he tries to go to the break zone, so now Yuna wants to remove him, but he wants to return himself to hand. There's a rule in the advanced rules that says when multiple replacement effects are trying to replace the same event, the card that's getting moved, its own effects take precedence and will apply first. So he will return himself to your hand, and then Yuna won't see him going to the break zone anymore, and so that won't come into effect. Now, Paradise. Firstly, if you use Paradise during the additional turn that you already got of Paradise, so you use Paradise a second time during that additional turn, you still lose after that additional turn, so there's basically no point in doing that. Basically, once you start that additional turn, you are going to lose after that, at the end of that turn, no matter what. Secondly, if you use Paradise during your opponent's turn, you will get the next turn, but you'll lose after that turn. So it's basically pointless because you're going to get the next turn anyway after your opponent's turn. However, if both players use Paradise in the same turn, then whoever's resolved last gets the next turn, which is also the turn they'll lose after. So actually, if your opponent uses Paradise, you might want to use Paradise during their turn to kind of steal the turn back off of them. Although, of course, again, you will lose after that turn. There's very funny kind of things that happen there. Minfilia's action ability. You only have to control 5 Scions at activation, not resolution. Once it starts resolving, it doesn't care how many Scions you have. Which makes sense, because she puts herself into the break zone to activate that, and she is one of your Scions. Now, Zemus. This is a super interesting one. Thank you to Tony Heavier for bringing it up. The question is, can you target a character that you already have in play, a unique character you already have in play? And the answer is yes. Why would you want to do this? The question was, can I activate Zemus, targeting another copy of Zemus in my break zone, pay 4, and then stack Exodus on top of that? Then if I call 4, or if my opponent calls 4, Exodus will resolve first, break Zemus and any other 4 costs, then Zemus will resolve and bring out the other Zemus, because there is no longer a Zemus in play, because he got broken by Exodus. And you can do that. The rules don't actually know what the ability is going to do when it resolves. When you activate that action ability, the rules can't prevent you from doing that. They can't even prevent you from targeting the forward you already have, because the rules don't actually know what's going to happen with that target. All they care about is that you paid the cost and chose a legal target, which is just a lightning forward in your break zone. So that's pretty cool. It means you can also do that kind of stuff with other cards like Devout. You could use Devout on a forward that you already have in play, or on a light or dark character when you already have another light or dark character in play. Of course, if at any point, if any of these abilities try to resolve and that character is still illegal to come into play, then it just won't come into play. It doesn't come into play and break them or anything like that. If it is illegal to put that character into play when the effect resolves, it just won't resolve. That's all. Yes, very interesting, so thanks to someone for bringing that up. And that should be it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that's helpful. If there's anything I missed out, as usual, ask me, let me know. Anything you want clarified or whatever, anything you have questions about, feel free. Cheers for watching though.